I'm going to press the button.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us for Active Countermeasures' first webcast of the new year. I know we're a little late to the game, but we got some excited material for you guys, and it's a partnered webcast. So we're lucky enough to have some people from Corelight joining us today. We've got Ed Smith and Alex. Is your last name Kirk? Is that how you pronounce it? Kirk. Yep. Okay, cool. So Ed and Alex, if you guys want to give a little brief description about what you guys do with Corelight. I know everybody else knows who we are, so.
Sure, yeah. So I'm Corelight's global principal for Suricata, which comes on the heels of 10 years with SourceFire's research team back in its heyday. So I have also spent time as a field SE down in the Southeast for Corelight as well. So I'm not just the Suricata guy. I speak to the entire portfolio at this point.
Hey everybody, Ed Smith, product marketing manager at Corelight. And I guess if you're not familiar with Corelight, we're a company that was founded by the creators and maintainers of Zeek, formerly known as Bro. And that's one of the things we'll be talking about today. So excited to be here with you.
Yeah, and Zeek is a tool that is used with our tool as well, AC-Hunter. We also have a Zeek channel in our Discord server, which brings me to my next thing. We do have a Threat Hunter community Discord server. It is ran and operated by the people at Active Countermeasures. However, we don't like to call it a company server. We like to keep it more to the community. So we do post about when we have upcoming webcasts and things like that, but we try not to advertise in it. I'm going to share a link to the server into the chat and go to webinar. If you aren't a member, I really would recommend joining. It's a great place to have conversation with your fellow threat hunters. And we also have a channel called the Live Webcast Chat channel. That's where we like to host our chat for these webcasts. That way the chat logs are there pretty much forever, so you can go back and look at things. Hey, while we're here, I want to mention to everybody, Active Countermeasures has changed the name of our product at the beginning of this year. It used to be AI Hunter, and now it's AC-Hunter. The reason for that was because a lot of people kept mistaking AI to mean artificial intelligence. That is not what it meant. We have changed the name so that that is no longer confusion. AC-Hunter now stands for Active Countermeasures Hunter, which the meaning of that is it's a tool by Active Countermeasures, and it's our hunting tool, therefore AC-Hunter.
Hey, if you've got questions during our webcast today, feel free to put them either in the questions area of GoToWebinar, or if you want to put them in the live webcast chat over on Discord. Both are good. We will have people watching both of those, and we're happy to answer questions at any point.
You know, the other thing we probably ought to mention, Ed, is the Corelight at Home program.
Ooh, what is that?
Please.
So we have a setup, and you need to be actually like affiliated with a legitimate company and not just using your personal Gmail account. But we're reacting to the fact that it's so difficult for people to get boxes into data centers now with COVID and everybody being out of the office. And we've got a version of the Corelight software that runs on Raspberry Pi. And we've got tips on hooking up to FreeHumio and other places like that to actually look at the data. So that's a great way if you're interested in getting deeper into Corelight, but you're not in a position to do a big eval at work. It's an interesting piece of technology to get to you at your house and see just what exactly your smart TV is doing as it's calling out to South Korea, or other embedded device shenanigans might be going on in your house. We actually had one of the participants found his Tesla making strange connections to the internet and did a great blog post about it.
Wow.
Yeah. Yes.
I haven't seen this since we chatted about it about a year ago. Is this, are you giving it away as software only? Are you selling it? Are you selling it with the Pi? How does that work?
So this is a giveaway. The software that goes onto it is something that we are offering commercially. We're not supporting the Raspberry Pi commercially necessarily, but it's the same software that would run on, VMware, or really, basically, it's a binary that runs on Linux. And so anywhere you've got a Linux box, you could drop it in. So that, the program with the Pi is really all about, getting users familiar with the technology and getting the word further out there in the community. We're not trying to capitalize off of that so much as propel people towards our more enterprise-grade solutions.
Makes a lot of sense. Very cool. A little bit about why we're doing this today. We've got a lot of issues going on with encrypted traffic on networks and how this affects network monitoring tools. So Alex and I are going to be talking today about the different aspects of this, how it affects your ability to do network monitoring and network intrusion detection. Specifically, we're going to talk about the 3 products that are relevant for this discussion. Zeek, RITA, and AC-Hunter are the 3 primary ones. We're also going to talk some more about some Corelight features that are relevant to this. And maybe just the question of how do you handle encrypted traffic it's worth discussing some of your options. The primary thing that we're concerned about with encrypted traffic is the payload. The payload is the actual stuff you're trying to send from one end to the other. All of that is going to be encrypted in most cases. You still get to see a lot of the top level stuff, and that includes the IP addresses that are talking to each other, the flags that are involved, the protocol, the ports involved, a lot of upper level details. And the best way I use to describe that is if this were the phone network, you get to see the phone number that the call came from, the phone number that the call is going to, when the call started, when the call stopped. You might have a couple more details about how it was routed internally if you get in touch with a phone company and get a subpoena to see the logs. But you don't get to actually hear what the 2 people said to each other. And the fact that a given person talked to another given person, both of whom were involved in a court case for 3.5 hours on a given Thursday night, may be relevant to a case, may help you make an implication that there's something going on, but it doesn't let you prove what they said. And so this is a lot of what we're seeing here with encrypted traffic on the wire. So what do we miss if we don't see the payload? Well, I got a couple of things that are truly relevant to security and to intrusion detection and threat hunting and all the rest. One is we can't see what request was placed from the client to the server. We may be able to make some guesses about what that content was. Alex, are you going to be talking about the different aspects of SSH and how? Yeah, great. We'll leave that for just a second. We can't see if malware was sent over the connection. We can maybe be able to see if there's enough data there to mean a file was probably sent, but we can't see what was inside it. If you're putting watermarks in your documents to say, hey, this is top secret, do not share outside of company networks, we can't look for that on the wire anymore because it's encrypted. We can't detect whether there's spam going by as opposed to legitimate mail. So anytime you've got an intrusion detection system that's looking for specific signatures inside the content, you're going to be blinded to those. And this is why every type of encrypted traffic that we allow becomes an issue. Alex, if you would.
Yep.
Here's an example. This was a quick connection out to www.whitehouse.gov using HTTPS, port 443. We've all done this. You probably all looked at this yourself. I just wanted to give a little bit of real-life example. Packet 11 listed at the top. We see some of the details of packet 11 down at the bottom. This is coming from port 443 back to my system, 10.0.0.41. And what you see down at the bottom, because I've selected TCP payload as the field I care about, I now get Wireshark to highlight that block. And while what came back was actually relatively readable text from whitehouse.gov saying the president did so-and-so today, what comes back obviously on the wire is total gibberish because it's encrypted. So this means that we have some limitations on what we can see. Wireshark, TCP dump, most any packet that can do packet capture can give you some form of this output. Whether you're looking for a particular string or trying to analyze it in a certain way, they will come across this and say, hey, that's encrypted. I can't tell what was in it. And then the question of whether that's a problem, we'll talk about that in a few slides. If you'd be so kind, Alex. So the kinds of traffic that we're talking about include, the easiest one is HTTPS because it's so prevalent. What this really is HTTP, the protocol used between a web client and a web server, but that is put inside of a TLS tunnel. So the client goes out to the server and says, port 443, and says, I would like to open up a TLS connection using this certificate that you handed me, and I'm going to do my best to trust, or I'm going to check to see whether I should trust it more accurately. And then what goes on inside that tunnel is an HTTP connection. I'm going to ask for things. I'm going to get responses back. I may ask for some more things. I may get responses back. But we can't see that from the outside world. TLS, which was formerly called SSL, I may use them interchangeably during this talk, but TLS is the current one, is used for all kinds of protocols. So the software that makes that initial tunnel shows up in different forms of, for example, SMTPS, IMAPS, POP3S. It's used in a lot of places on the internet. The code there is prevalent. There are alternatives to it. LibreSSL was one that was attempted to take off. But the OpenSSL library is used for a lot of these SSL, TLS, and SSL-based services.
Right, which of course gives us defenders the advantage of, once we've figured out how to parse interesting bits out of TLS, it's going to apply across all those different protocols, and we don't have to figure out what to do with the encryption of each individual protocol on its own.
I hadn't thought about that, but that's absolutely true, that the homogeneity of this makes it easier for us to identify different aspects of it. Well, I'll try to remember to cover briefly JAW 3 if you don't, Alex, by the time we're done.
Sure.
All right. Second form that is used very heavily is a VPN. Now, there are different packages that make this possible. But if I want to have two networks be able to exchange traffic, but not have people on the outside world see it, I can drop the original approach, which was to protect one port at a time with TLS or SSL, and instead say, I'm going to encrypt everything from one network going through to the other network and everything coming back from the second network to the first. So this VPN approach happens at the network level. You have either a piece of software or in many cases a piece of hardware at both ends. All the traffic coming into them is encrypted, sent across the wire, decrypted at the other end, and then handed out to the target. The signatures and how you would identify these and deal with them are slightly different, but the concepts are very similar. And in many cases, they still use that same OpenSSL library. There are commercial and free versions of all of these, by the way. The third approach is SSH, and this one is a terminal application that allows me to sit at my keyboard, type some characters, and then they show up at the command prompt on a machine thousands of miles away. And obviously the screen updates coming back over that connection happen in an encrypted form as well. If that was all it did, I wouldn't even mention it, but SSH also, like a VPN, has the ability to carry other types of traffic through that initial connection. So in many ways, it's a little bit like if I took a terminal application and plugged a VPN on top of it, you wouldn't be too far off of that with reality. The final one that I want to mention, because is relevant today, is that we started off with DNS, which was unencrypted, and now we're moving into the encrypted form. So I want to be able to talk a little bit about how DNS happens. Let's go ahead to the next slide, Alex. DNS used to be our go-to. This was the one where even if everything else was encrypted and obfuscated and impossible to read, we'd always have the ability to look at the DNS requests. When a client is just about to go out and transfer a file out or pull something down or send data back and forth, the first thing it has to do is locate the other system in the conversation. And DNS is where this would commonly happen. So the original types of DNS, UDP and TCP port 53 lookups, you could almost always go in and pull those and pull out the request, pull out the reply, and say, aha, this person is trying to go to www.shouldn'tbebuyingthisstuff.org. Let me give a simple one. Versus going to www.ourcompany.com, which is probably acceptable during work hours. There are two other forms of DNS, multicast DNS and link layer multicast name resolution. I'll cover how to get some more detail on those in just a minute. But with unencrypted name lookups, we could at least tell who you're trying to talk to, even if we couldn't see what you said or what the other end replied with. And sometimes that's enough to tell us whether this is benign and company focused or malicious and probably shouldn't be happening on work hours. I'm not going to get into much detail about NetBIOS. That's an additional way of doing name lookups. Obviously, this comes out of the Windows world and is great for a given Active Directory domain of machines, but it isn't used quite as much for kind of internet-related traffic. There are all kinds of opinions on that. You're welcome to call me wrong, and I'm happy to agree with it. But let's stick with DNS for the moment.
Hey, Bill?
Yes, of course.
Sorry, we had a couple questions pop up in the last few minutes that I wanted to see if you could cover for me.
You got it.
Go to webinar chat. Does RDP use TLS?
Yes.
Okay. And is it possible to decrypt the payloads?
Generally, we don't assume you can. You may be able to if you have access to the keys that are involved. Alex, you want to cover that?
Yeah, I mean, as a technological possibility, almost anything encrypted can be decrypted. TLS 1.3 has made that much more difficult, but certainly there are commercial solutions out there that do man in the middle and decrypt these things. You know, typically in like a large enterprise where they can roll out trusted certificates for that device doing the man in the middle so that people don't get a bunch of browser warnings about untrusted certificates as they're pinning the traffic and decrypting and recrypting it. But as Bill said, you know, the focus of today's conversation is about things that we can do without actually needing to get to the decrypted payload.
Right. If I make a statement to my employees that all of your encrypted traffic needs to go through this box over here, and we're going to decrypt it and then re-encrypt it and send it back on out to the original target as a proxy, that is absolutely technologically possible. But it also means that as a company, we may be decrypting your test results coming back from your doctor. As you look at the doctor's website and pull down the portal with your latest blood test results on whatever medical condition you may have. So there are privacy issues involved in doing that as well. A lot of what we're going to be talking about today is what are our options on the assumption that we don't have the ability to do that. You may, and that's great. But let's think about what our options are otherwise. The normal unencrypted DNS is being extended with at least 3 more variants. The first is DNS over TLS. And this is where that same DNS request is sent through a TLS connection, just like we did with HTTPS. But it's going to go to TCP port 853 to a special DNS server that's listening on that port, knows to decrypt the incoming request, goes out and finds the answer for you and sends the answer back through that same tunnel. There's another form called DNS over HTTPS. And this is where I set up an HTTPS connection, obviously, to port 443, where HTTPS usually runs. And then I place DNS requests over that and come back. Well, why would you pick one over the other? Well, we've done so much in the way of HTTPS that's a known technology. It's relatively easy to set up. There's no one answer about whether you should use one over the other. They're two differing approaches. With both, you still have to trust the server to whom you're talking. A lot of what is advertised for these two approaches is that you get to hide your requests. Your ISP doesn't get to see them. The people on your network don't get to see them. Your network administrators don't get to see what DNS requests you're placing. And that statement's true. However, the person running the server that you're making requests to does see what requests you're making. And so while it's never possible to totally get rid of that need for trust, you do have one third form called oblivious DNS over HTTPS. And the only difference between this and DNS over HTTPS is that you place your request through a local proxy first, so that the server at the other end doesn't get to see your IP address. It's a little wonky. That one is not as commonly used. I think it's basically under-designed would be the best way to describe it. With all of these, as network administrators, we lose the ability to see who you're trying to talk to. And while that isn't the sole problem we're trying to solve, it's a good clue when we're trying to decide if traffic is benign or malicious. So I did put together a blog on alternative DNS techniques. You're welcome to go and take a look. If you go to www.activecountermeasures.com and go to the blog section, you can click on it there. It's a reference largely as opposed to a full-fledged write-up. Shelby got a little tired of me doing 13-page blogs, and so we're gonna call this one a reference, I think. But it talks more about these and also gets into a little more detail about NetBIOS and the different aspects of these types of name lookups. Alex?
Yep.
So I did want to switch a little bit and say, if you've got encrypted traffic, what are your options? Are we stuck? Do we totally lose this visibility into the network traffic? And the answer, happily enough, is no. But you have to think about the appropriate way to handle these. The first thing to consider is, if encrypted traffic isn't causing trouble for your network monitoring and analysis, leave it as is. In some cases, you have simple bandwidth checks that you want to perform. Those are largely not affected by whether something is encrypted or not. Or you may be looking at aspects of traffic that don't require you to look at the payload. Great, you're all set. Leave it as is. If you are having trouble looking at that content and you need to find a different approach, you've got a few options. The first is to block that traffic entirely. And that's one of the reasons why I've tried to put some details about, for example, the DNS alternatives in that blog, so you know which ports to look at and which target systems to consider. You may decide that blocking it entirely is appropriate. The second is to force the traffic through a proxy. And when you do this, if you set up a local system, you tell your clients, you can get out with this traffic, but you first got to go through this box. That box is set to unencrypt the traffic, inspect the request, send the request off to the target machine. When the reply comes back, we get to look at the reply. And if we're happy with both the request and the reply, then we send the reply back to the original requester. You get some privacy issues there too. You get to see a lot of what's going on, but really this is a way of saying, I've got certain types of traffic I need to see in my environment. Let's go and pull it in locally. All right, next slide, please. Another thing you can consider is that monitoring tools have the ability to at least identify that certain types of traffic are encrypted. If you look at the beginning of any SSH connection, the server sends back literally the characters uppercase S, uppercase S, uppercase H dash as the first 4 characters back from the server. So if I'm looking for that in the first 4 bytes that come back, I can identify that a particular type of traffic is SSH, even if I can't see the encrypted stuff that comes after. With TLS, we get to look at the negotiation that happens between the client and the server. And I think Alex is going to have some more to talk about that in just a minute. Zeek, the open source project from Corelight, is the one that's able to identify these types of traffic. And in some cases, it's a very quick check just to identify, hey, is this a certain type of traffic? Great, let's flag that in the conversation so that my network administrator knows what was going on that port, even if it isn't the standard port that one would normally use. All right.
So, yes.
Yep. So if I could just wrap up one little bit here. So as we've said, we may not be able to see what was said between the client and the server, and that's the difference between payload and metadata. But remember, we can still do some analysis on that traffic without seeing the content. First of all, if we're looking for long connections between one end and the other, we can still see that a connection was opened, it was left open for 16 hours, and then finally closed. If we're looking for beacons, I can see that a connection is made every 5 minutes, every 5 minutes, every 5 minutes, even if I can't see the content. If I have connections that are going out to hosts that are known to be malicious, they've either been probing our network or we know for some reason that they're part of a malware command and control network, we can still see the target IP and flag them for that. And since, Alex, you're going to cover JA3 in a little bit, I'm going to skip over that and let you talk about that. I guess the last bit is that when it comes to DNS, as we've seen, DNS can be sometimes encrypted and sometimes not. So there isn't a final answer, a single answer as to whether this affects our ability to threat hunt this type of network traffic. It depends on what kind of DNS your clients are doing.
And as well, what your policy is in terms of allowing encrypted DNS traffic. Certainly, we're early enough in the internet moving in that direction that it's very easy for organizations to say, hey, I want to have at least a basic level of visibility into what you're doing on your work computer. So if I see any encrypted DNS coming out of it, we're going to call that a policy violation and either block it or, sanction you at the HR level or whatever.
Yeah, it's a good way to approach it. Yep, I hadn't thought about policy, but you're absolutely right.
So diving in a little bit deeper here, let's talk about what is actually going on with Zeek when it is parsing some of these encrypted connections. And what I've got here on screen to kind of show some of this with is samples of our X509 and SSL logs. X509, for those not familiar with it, is the standard that covers certificates used in cryptographic exchanges. And so this is all certificate information in particular that's getting pulled out of that exchange that goes on between the server and the client as that encryption is being set up. And, to the point of understanding whether or not something is malicious just from that outside wrapper, you can see in here that there are some obvious things like the subject of the certificates that can be used for some additional context around an encrypted connection. And, kind of a case in point of where this can be useful for you outside of, you see Google and you're not particularly worried about it, especially if this is in a Google IP range. One of the detections that I actually published a blog on when I worked for SourceFire 10 years ago was about the number of malware authors that were using the X509 defaults in the SSL command line tools and generating certificates that had an organization name of Internet Widgets PTY, which is, not always confined to malware, obviously, because it is that default, and so you'll get it on internal certificates where people didn't bother inputting things properly, or other cases where folks are just not wanting to put valid information in there. But that one bit of detection is something that I've had dozens of people speak to me after presentations over the course of these last 10 years saying, just that one little thing has led me on a whole bunch of different hunts where I ended up finding something totally crazy that was missed by other tools. So, we can begin to see the value as we just begin to look at the contents of these certificates themselves.
Very nice.
Speaking to the question of JA3, so that is a hash protocol that was developed by 3 folks with the initials of JA over at Salesforce. And basically what this is doing is taking particular parts of the handshake and the order in which they appear and hashing those into a fingerprint for both the client and the server for a given connection. And, while not as ironclad as like a SHA-256 in terms of uniquely identifying one specific thing, because there's only so many combinations of SSL certificates and handshakes setup that you can do, there are still projects out there that have databases of known malicious JA3 signatures, as well as known good ones, so that you can kind of see, based upon this hash, well, hey, that looks a heck of a lot like, Firefox version 345 or whatever it is they're on these days. They keep revving so often. But, it's that talking to an Apache 2.56 server. Whereas if you've got, a piece of malware that is doing something non-standard, that might show up with a completely different JA3, which could either hit that, professionally published block list, or be something that you just do a sort in your environment for all of those JA3 hashes and look for the ones that are rare, because those are the ones that are going to be not your standard browsers talking to web servers and might be a thread that you can go digging on into. But, you can see looking at these logs that we have really a very deep level of detail going down into, what's the cipher suite that was used. We're capturing the certificate chains as files so that you can actually, not only see our results of how that was parsed out and whether the trust relationship holds, but you've actually got a copy of these things for forensics if desired. We're also doing validation of the certificates just from the perspective of, hey, is this still valid? Has it expired? Is it brand new? And there's a lot of, again, information that you can glean just based upon the age and the status of a certificate. And there's a lot of malware campaigns, for example, that you see showing up with certificates that have just been created within the last several days. And so having the ability to flag on those within your environment and then either match them up to, legitimate applications that have just had their certificate renewed, or figuring out that you really have no idea what this is and need to pull further on that thread is a powerful tool that you can take out of all this information. We even get all the way down to subject alternative names in certificates may give you DNS information that you are not seeing on an encrypted basis if you've got a DNS over HTTPS sort of a situation going on. So really there's a wealth of data that is available to you just from looking at the TLS setup and what's going on before you dive into that encrypted connection.
And just as a quick note, all of that is pulled out of encrypted traffic. We get all of that information even when you can't see the payload. And I think that's maybe obvious to everybody but me, but I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page.
Yeah, exactly. And part of the beauty of what you can do with this too is detect exploits against some of these encryption algorithms themselves. A lot of folks on here may remember the curveball vulnerability that was released last January, CVE 2020-0601. And that was such a big deal because it allowed forged certificates to show up as trusted and basically have software execute on the remote system as if that was coming from a trusted authority simply by manipulating the certificate curve. Well, what you've got here in these 9 lines of code is the Zeek script that we actually released open source the same day that the vulnerability was dropped, that uses the fact that we're parsing out the key algorithm and the curve and all of the cryptographic properties of the signature to have this be the entirety of the detection logic that's necessary to find that vulnerability. So having that sort of breakdown of the protocol itself is very powerful from that perspective. And it's not just a one-time thing here. This is something that we were able to do with multiple different vulnerabilities last year. This one is the GNU TLS bug from last summer that was such a big hubbub when it was released. And again, you can see that it's just a very quick matter of a couple of lines of code to be able to take something that has been, thoroughly parsed out and understood and categorized by Zeek, and use that information for detection of exploits in the wild. Certainly, as someone, yes.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, as someone who's tried to do this sort of thing in snort and suricata signatures in the past, this would be about 10 times more complex, obscure, and prone to false positives than something done in a Zeek script like this.
And so this is actually, if I understand correctly, this is at the plugin level where you don't have to recompile Zeek itself to be able to use these facilities.
That's correct. These are just scripts that you can immediately load into Zeek or a Corelight appliance. And again, these were published by Corelight on the day that these vulnerabilities were released. We've been doing a lot of rapid response where we can give detection back to the community. And because these were so easy for us to put together, they've been dropped back out to the open source so that anybody can freely just add them into their installation.
Very nice.
So one of the other things that we've been able to do with our encrypted traffic analytics is something that's on everyone's mind recently is dealing with the Sunburst SolarWinds bit of malware. And what we found as we were digging through, because we've got several customers who have given us access to devices on their network to do research and analytics, what we found is that in cases where compromised SolarWinds devices were going through an SSL proxy to hit the internet, what was happening is that the initial request to that proxy was coming across in plain text. And so that revealed this user agent string that we knew to be involved with the compromise. And then once that initial call to that SSL proxy was made, the encrypted requests proceed from there. And in a legitimate sort of a scenario where it really was the SolarWinds Orion improvement devices going out and connecting to their systems, you're going to see connections off to solarwinds.com domains. But what we found in less, I guess in more malicious environments is that these connections were happening to a server name on the certificate that was presented by the server in that SSL connection that was not associated to solarwinds.com at all. And so that leaves us with a very easy detection of being able to say, all right, if I have seen a device that's ever got that SolarWinds Orion improvement user agent string, then make a connection out to a TLS server that was not on the solarwinds.com domain, then I've got a smoking gun that a malicious actor is actually in the environment and doing something nasty. And while this is going to rely on some level of plain text information because of that initial request to the proxy that reveals that user agent string, having that sort of a setup is not particularly uncommon in enterprise networks. And variations of this certainly could be used even if you had just asset tracking information about what devices were, what types of software, and then comparing them to what sort of encrypted connections they were making to see if a purpose-built device is reaching out to strange places on the internet that it should not be. And one of the things that is really worth pointing out here, particularly in light of Sunburst, is really the value of having a network detection and response record through Zeek of traffic that you have before the time that you're actually trying to monitor things. And really the rationale for this, of course, is that with something like Sunburst that was not known for a period of like 9 months while these actors were running around in folks' networks, all of the signature-based technology in the world wasn't going to do any good looking for those actors because the signature simply hadn't been written for a threat that no one knew about. And if you're running packet capture as your way to try to have a record of things in case something happens and you need to go back and what went down, the reality of that is that in most environments, you're talking about a 30-day window, perhaps 60 or 90 if your organization has spent a huge amount of money on a NetWitness or another solution in that category. But because Zeek logs are compact enough, typically in the 1% of PCAP range and even smaller once you compress them, it's very easy to be able to take logic from an attack as it was actually released and compare that back against the record of traffic that you've got from those Zeek logs and be able to definitively say whether or not, for example, you were a part of that compromise. And so, regardless of whether you're talking about encrypted traffic or decrypted traffic, it's very powerful to be able to have that record that you can go back in time with and do retrospective detection on. So,
hey guys.
Yes?
Sorry, excuse me. We had a few more questions that I was wondering if you guys could answer for us.
Hello.
Can Zeek replace Splunk, or can they be used together to do what SIEM will do?
SIM, yeah. So Zeek is not a replacement for Splunk. It works in concert with Splunk. All of the logs that are generated by Zeek are forwarded off to the SIM of your choice. And while we support Splunk, we've got a multitude of others that we support as well. But the idea really is that most folks who've got Splunk today, they're bringing in security data from, host devices, from firewalls, from application servers, from all these different points across the network. And all of those things are reporting logs in different formats with different levels of verbosity with no kind of glue and standardization between them. And so you can replace a lot of the logs that you're pulling in from all of your network devices with Zeek logs instead, and have something that is got a standard format that has a unique identifier on a per connection basis that allows you to pivot through all your data very rapidly for incident response, and that can be instrumented in such a way that it's not eating cycles on your Active Directory controller to turn on DNS answer logging, or firewall cycles logging verbose connections there, but really can be instrumented passively off of a tap or a packet broker to give you all this information, without taxing those other boxes or taxing the administrators of those systems to make sure that they're turning those logs on, they're leaving them on, they're not missing new devices as they get deployed out to the field. So this is all data that's going to make your SIM better.
Awesome. And one more I'm going to throw at you, Alex. I'm thinking this is more of a question for you. There is some research on attack detection on E2EE traffic, e.g. brute force detection by analyzing traffic patterns. Are there ready-to-use Zeek packages around that do something like that?
So that specific protocol, I don't believe so, but I've actually got slides here I'm about to get to that talk about some of the work we're doing in the packages we do have that looks at like packet size and timing and other factors along those lines. So I'm happy to speak more directly with whoever's answering that question offline, but I'll go ahead and advance the slide for now and talk to a little bit of that in more detail here, I think. Unless there were further questions at this time.
Nope, that was it.
Cool. So, we've talked a lot about TLS here. I want to point out that a lot of that same level of parsing and visibility is present in Zeek logs for SSH as well. Again, we're going to get information about algorithms in use, what the client software is that's in play. This HASSH is similar to JA3 in terms of hashing some of the connection strings that are present in the certificates and key exchange for SSH. And, while there's not nearly the same level of obvious giveaways in terms of, I'm going to put an organization name on a certificate, some of these details like the host key are going to be enough that in a deep forensic investigation, you can really go back and pin things down to particular systems and identities a lot better than you could without this level of visibility. And, in terms of additional open source work that has been released by Corelight around this, again, having the protocol all parsed out is allowed us to drop detections for vulnerabilities that are out in the wild. This one was an authentication bypass, and I don't have the code on screen here because it was a bit more complex, but again, it was something that we were able to release within a matter of a day or two of that vulnerability dropping out of the wild because it's something that's so well parsed already in Zeek. Additionally, I'll call out that there's a number of policy scripts that are available for Zeek as part of the standard bundle that are kept updated on the Zeek GitHub that do some generic detections of auth bypass in particular, but other oddities around SSH traffic that are just going to be part of that default Zeek installation that you've got out there. But in addition to all of the things that are in the open source, one of the things that Corelight has done commercially recently is we've added a package that we're calling the Encrypted Threat Collection. And that is actually giving here, what I've got on the pie chart is the inferences that we're able to give the user based upon the nature of the traffic that we've watched for SSH in particular. So, for example, it's very easy to tell the difference between files being downloaded and somebody sitting interactively at a keyboard typing away. But we can also tell if there's been a connection to this SSH server before, or if the client got the, hey, do you trust this device's fingerprint interaction back and forth. We can tell if there is a script that is being run across the connection because of the nature of the size and the timing, again, of the packets that go back and forth. And, the nice thing about all of these inferences is that we've been able to take them out to the real world by virtue of that research program that I talked about, where folks let us put live sensors on their network for those sensor purposes, and not only validate that these do in fact work well, but then extend some of these things into places beyond their original intention. Prime example here, this keystrokes detection that was originally written for SSH, the team was able to generalize so that that inference will show up on any type of encrypted connection. And literally, we had a large university that came on as part of that research program. And within 24 hours of us deploying those boxes with the code that included the generic keystroke detection over an SSH tunnel, we detected a pair of reverse shells talking back to China. And so there's a great deal of work that is being put into improvements in this package going forward. Part of this includes detection of encrypted DNS, so that you'll be able to do that policy enforcement that I talked about earlier and have that visibility into your network, as well as just taking some of the open source components like that certificate validation that I talked about and packaging it up in a cleaner sort of a notice format that's easier for people to digest than having to hunt through SSH logs directly on their side. So there's a great deal of work that we're doing to make sure that we keep up with the state of the art here. And, I think you're going to continue to see releases on this package as, we dive deeper into what we actually can do without decrypting packages.
That's beautiful that you can do so much without ever having to go down into the encrypted payload. Being able to figure out that someone is trying to brute force their way in and it's an automated login versus a real person who happens to be on vacation in Bulgaria and logging in with keystrokes and a normal password login. It's all the difference in the world in trying to be able to segment traffic into malicious and benign.
Right.
Well done. We want to do one last note on RITA and AC-Hunter. These are our bread and butter tools for doing threat hunting off of Zeek logs as our data source. And the beautiful part there is that these were always designed to kind of not care whether the content underneath was encrypted or not. We're looking at the timing between connections, how many connections there are, how long they're left open, what are the IP addresses they're talking to. And many of these techniques simply continue to work. So I don't have to put up 7 or 8 slides showing 12 different workarounds to be able to handle encrypted traffic. By and large, these just continue to work the way they always have. So in both RITA and AC-Hunter, RITA is the free version, AC-Hunter is the commercial one, we can still check for beacons, high volume beacons, which we call strobes, long connections, connections out to blacklisted hosts, and also client signature checks and the certificate being used. All of those continue to work as before. You may run into issues with encrypted traffic with DNS, depending on whether it's encrypted or not. It doesn't mean the above techniques stop working, but it does mean that you may lose one piece of information about where the client intended to go. Also, unencrypted, the check for an unexpected protocol on a well-known port may not work as well because we may not be able to see that protocol anymore. So there are just a couple of them that don't work as well as they used to.
Although, in the classic symbiosis between our two organizations, one of the parts of that encrypted threat package is the ability to see when something is writing on what should be a encrypted port but is coming across in plain text. We were able to find a large organization that had all of their Active Directory on the secure port, but it was coming across in plain text on the wire.
Oh, no. Oh, that's almost as bad as the TLS and SSL option of no encryption, which is technically still a valid TLS connection, but we're just going to talk plain text because we're lazy that way. Oh, that's terrible. Wow. That is gold right there. Well done. Let's go ahead.
Yep.
Obviously, we're not asking you to type all of these down. We hope that you've already downloaded the PDF from the ACM-webcast-content channel in the Threat Hunter Community Discord. Link on how to get into Discord, obviously, is still down in the chat. You're welcome to connect up there. These are references to some of the blogs that we have, some of the tools that we've talked about today. Alex, do you want to talk a little bit about yours?
Yeah. So the one on the very top of the list there, some of you who are Zeek heads out in the community might have seen we've had a Zeek cheat sheet available for some time. We've actually recently updated that to have some of the more current advances in Zeek, as well as an overview of that encrypted traffic collection that I talked about. The link that you see here is going to be live for the next week. So if you're interested in that in particular, please don't hold off on getting it. Go get it now. The rest of the blog examples, of course, are going to be up for, as long as the Corelight blog exists, but are more in-depth dives into how some of these detections are actually functioning.
Wonderful. Hey, that's great. Keith, Casey, Shelby, and Ed, do you have any other questions that you've seen that we should answer now?
Yeah, we got a few questions in the GoToWebinar that I can throw at you guys. So first, before I throw questions at you guys, we are getting a few questions about the slide deck and things like that. Like Bill mentioned, the slide deck is available in our Discord server under the ACM webcast content channel. I also did put it in the GoToWebinar handouts, so you should be able to download the PDF there as well. And questions for you guys. Can RITA digest more than 2 gigabytes per second?
That comes down to processing power. RITA is actually reasonably streamlined so that when we get a compressed Zeek log that comes in, it actually is able to chew through it pretty quickly. I think the general answer is yes, in almost all cases. We find that RITA and AC-Hunter are doing fine up into the 5, 6, 7, 8 gigabits per second range. Partly depends on the how your traffic is structured. It is a whole lot easier to look at 10,000 connections, each of which is sending a huge amount of data, versus 10 million connections that are each a DNS request and reply and add up to about 200 bytes worth of total content, because a lot of the work that Zeek and RITA and AC-Hunter have to do are based on how many connections you're looking at. So I can't make a blanket statement that it will always work, but as a general statement, 2, 3, 4, 5 gigabytes should be fine. Gigabits per second, I apologize.
Awesome. Next question would be for you, Alex. Why should we use Corelight Zeek sensor instead of using Zeek from its own web page? What's the difference?
So there's a couple of key benefits to going with a Corelight appliance. One is just ease of use. Setting up Zeek open source can be a bit of a project at times, to be honest. Whereas a Corelight appliance, I got one from my home lab here, and I had it forwarding data out to Splunk in about 12 minutes from the time I plugged it in. So it's a very turnkey kind of a process for setting up and upgrading. And, we've got health monitoring involved with the systems that you can opt into as well. But part of it is also to have that, commercial level of support behind you as an organization, and to have appliances that are going to actually hit. We talk about speed and how fast you're going to be able to get with these things. And open source Zeek, well managed, can get up to, 3, 4, 5 gigabit speeds very easily. But the Corelight appliances have, the specialized NICs on them and all the other tweaks to the operating system and other places like that to really make things scream. And so at this point, we've got a 25 gigasecond box that's actually delivered as a 1U appliance that will do all of that Zeek processing for you. So there's a lot of basically easy button that is involved when you're going with Corelight that is not necessarily going to be the case with open source. One other thing that I'll throw out that is a little bit tangential to this, but for those who might not have heard, Corelight is also offering Suricata on our appliances these days at the IDS level. And one of the things we've done there is actually taken Suricata alerts and put Zeek UIDs into them so that you can now have a single pivot in between an IDS alert and all the metadata that surrounds it, so that it's that much easier to actually investigate those alerts and do something useful with them.
Beautiful.
Awesome. All right. And Grayson, I saw the question that you want me to have answered. Before I get to that, Bill, I'm going to ask you what I'm guessing is a quick question. Can RITA be used with Splunk?
You can send the output to Splunk if you want. You could have it set up with a cron job where that could run every 5 minutes and send off information. it's not a direct fee, but it could be set up that way.
All right. And we had a few people want this question answered. I don't know if you guys can see it in Discord. It's what about orgs that have many BAAs and trusted TLS URLs in their environments? I guess it boils down to tuning the known TLS domains.
From a Zeek perspective, we're going to grab all the information about all those domains, regardless of how many there are. And from there, it's kind of a question of, can you apply some kind of a useful whitelist to those to cut down the noise of which ones you want to actually dig into? Do you want to have other criteria that you use before you kick off an investigation into any one of those domains? I don't think it's particularly problematic to have a whole bunch of different, TLS services in an environment. It's just going to make it perhaps a bit harder to actually hunt through if you have a large pile of legitimate ones.
And we have the ability to whitelist TLS certificates as well. It's not, we haven't heavily covered that in either our documentation or on, for example, a blog, but we'll try to do a blog on that pretty soon. We do want to make a big thank you to everybody who took part in this. Ed, Vijit, John, and Roger all took part in setting this up. Alex, thank you so much for being a presenter today. We love having you on here. You're welcome back anytime. Do you want to thank... Sorry?
Happy to be here. Thank you.
Wonderful. Shelby, thank you so much for setting this up. And also Chris and KC. We apologize for not putting you up on the slide, but thank you very much for helping out with questions in the background. If you have other questions about this webcast, the live webcast chat will be on for a while. You're welcome to go and continue the discussion there. And I will be checking in from time to time over on Discord to help answer questions. I hope, Alex and Ed, that you'll kind of help in and answer some of the ones that are relevant to your side too. Hey, thank you so much to all of you who took the time to join us today. We're really pleased to have you here. Please check back. We'll have the schedule up on both Active Countermeasures site soon for upcoming webcasts. And Alex, I hope you'll go and put out some notes up in the live webcast chat about upcoming webcasts of yours.
For sure.
That's great. I should note that the certificate that you'll get tomorrow is, of course, encrypted, and you have to decrypt it in order to be able to present it. But it's only appropriate for this talk.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yes, and thank you again for our partners at Corelight. Thank you, Alex and Ed, for being here today. It was really awesome to get to do this with you guys. Hopefully, we'll get to do something like this again sometime soon. Thank you again, everybody, for being here today, and we will see you in the next one.
Sounds great.
That does. Appreciate it.